Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to grow their team and accelerate their business. I'm here today with Luis. Luis, would you introduce yourself?
Name's Louis Dussan. I am the founder and current board member of AEYE, which is a company that primarily does automotive grade for mobility and autonomy in ADAS LiDAR and is currently listed on the Nasdaq under ticker symbol LIDR.
Awesome. The way I like to get to know people is I love to know where you came from. What was your first job? Like, how'd you make your first dollar? For me, it was a paper route. And what was it for you?
Wow, you brought up a paper route. I have to say that's probably what it was for me too. I forgot about that, but it was a paper route.
Cool. Any other cool ways that you made money in your early years?
Mowing lawns for just the neighbors. My first, I would say, real job was selling apparel at a shop in the mall called Ativo. I don't even know if people remember that, but that was a thing.
Yeah, remember it well. Well, what toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
There must have been something related to space. My mom always tells a story of when I was younger and she was putting me to bed. I would step on her head and look out the window and then tell her that I wanted to go visit the other stars. I don't know, I was like 5 years old. She would tell me that. I'm a big Star Wars, Star Trek, Stargate, sci-fi fan. So yeah, there was something there. I don't remember what specific toy. I remember I liked Voltron growing up, but yeah, there was always something.
Yeah, you brought back some memories with Voltron, right? The kids that watch Power Rangers or whatever, they have no idea how good it used to be.
I know, I know. My kids watch it too, and I just think it's, I'm biased. I do think it's silly compared to what Voltron brought.
Yeah. What was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
Favorite was physics and science, anything with science. Least favorite was probably social studies or English. Just wasn't a big fan of social studies.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of writing. Thank goodness for AI, right? Well,
Right.
shortcuts are very helpful. What quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
I don't know who actually did this quote, to be honest with you, but it's something that I find myself repeating over and over again, which is that it is easy to know just enough to think you're right, but not enough to know you're crazy wrong.
Yeah, I love that. I had a guest that had an early startup before, long before they'd been on the call with me, but they were trying to manufacture something and they were on the cutting edge as they started to play around with the invention and what they were trying to put to market. They realized that there was a physical impossibility in the premise of their product. So I don't know what it was. They're trying to defy gravity in some way or something. But then they found the paper that they should have found earlier. Had they found it earlier, they would have saved themselves millions of dollars of heartache. What they were trying to do was not physically possible. So that comes up for me when you mention that quote.
Yeah, no, and as a founder and a tech founder at that, I think there's always in the back of our minds the issue that we may have made a fatal error in our assumptions. I understand the feeling. Thankfully, it didn't happen for me, but I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, for sure. I think I do some fractional CTO work for several folks. And one of the topics I often bring up is this difference between capacity and capability. So, like as leaders, we can think of ourselves or we can often think of our people, well, they're just not capable of that. Is that true? Like they don't have that capability, or is it just their capacity at the moment? We've kind of done this thing internally where we've said you can't use the word capability, you can only use the word capacity because it challenges us as leaders to come up with if it were my capacity, then what kinds of things could I do to increase my capacity and be able to rise to the challenge? Is it a skill that I need to go learn? Is it a better time management? Is it like, what is it that could increase my capacity? How could I grow into this rather than jumping? And I think as entrepreneurs, the moment that we start thinking that something is not possible, it has huge diminishing returns. But if our current way we're operating just doesn't have the capacity for the new product or the new onboarding of clients, then that's the problem we have to solve.
Yeah, something related to that, but not exactly, is something I always teach. Anybody who I mentor or any new employees that I bring in, I always tell them that you know what you know and you know what you don't know. But the difficult part is you don't know what you don't know. And the most important thing is to try to minimize that. If you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know what they don't know, but are extremely confident, they're dangerous. And so you always want to surround yourself with people whose that circle is minimized. And you want to sort of follow an educational regimen where you constantly, especially as founders and entrepreneurs, we want to try to minimize the things we don't know that we don't know.
Yeah, I love that. We've used this quad box, and the quad box has known to me and known to others. So the way you expand your capacity is by getting feedback and then also increasing disclosure. Like the more you're known and the more feedback you get, the more it eliminates what would otherwise be the unconscious, right? You wouldn't know. If others will give you feedback, then you can expand your capacity. Like you can learn more about yourself. You can be more self-aware, but then your responsibility is disclosure. I have to make myself more known to other people. Well, awesome. What tech trend has significantly impacted your industry, and how did your company respond?
I would say the biggest one that impacted my industry, and I'm using it from the time I was at AI and in general, how I started the company, was obviously autonomous navigation, or the ability to do autonomous driving. And of course, the response to that was that I developed the company. And then it went through a couple of transformations as that topic itself matured, right? At first, it was sky's the limit. We're going to develop an autonomous vehicle that does everything, level 5 right away. And then as it matured, people realized, okay, it's a lot harder, and I'll explain why in a second. The change is that there's going to be a path to level 5 autonomy through levels of ADAS. And I think the way that we responded during that time was we were specifically in the robo-taxi business, and we had to make a decision probably a year before. We kind of predicted that it would be very difficult to create a level 5 autonomous vehicle with the current set of software that was available. And we thought it would be fixed route, under 35 miles an hour, geofenced, that you would see that, but you wouldn't see it just door to door. And so we went into ADAS, and now you see that that is really the way level 5 autonomy is kind of going. It's robo-taxi, but very limited. The level of ADAS will eventually, and it's not the car's level 1 or 2 or 3. The car can do functions that are level 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5, right? And so I think that's the way we responded, by embracing ADAS.
Define ADAS for the listeners.
Sure. Advanced driving assistance functions. So rather than you picking up, let's say, a cruise vehicle or Waymo vehicle that you get on your app and it drives you somewhere, ADAS is the idea that you buy a vehicle on the lot that has some capability to do autonomous functions.
Yeah, I used to own an M550 that I felt like it drove itself. I still had to have my hands on the wheel. I could put it in a cruise, a desired top speed. And then as people would come in front of me, it would automatically match their speed at a comfortable distance. And I could set that distance, whether it was 1, 2, or 3 kind of car lengths. So cruise was really automatic speed control with obstacles while on the highway. And then there was some sort of lane correction also. I would stay in the lane. It would get irritable if it detected that there was no resistance on the steering wheel. Like it didn't want me to just let it drive, but it felt like it could. Is that expectation surpassed now? I've never been in a Tesla and done S mode, but I've heard of several people avoiding DUIs that way. What my expectation should be if I were to go buy a new car today in terms of autonomous driving?
Highway autopilot would be the number one thing that you would, I think, be rightfully able to ask for. And a highway autopilot is this idea that you can take your hands off the wheel, but you have to keep your eyes on the road. And on certain limited access highways, the car can essentially drive by itself. And there's several people offering that, right? Mercedes has a version of it. BMW has a version of it. The two most popular ones, the ones that I think in my mind are safety first, well-constructed, and responsibly getting better and better, are Ford's Blue Cruise and GM's Super Cruise. And the reason why I think that is the case is they have a way of correcting the vehicle's location to like a couple centimeters using various technologies, including radar, camera, and then downloaded LiDAR maps, especially GM, which produces its own LiDAR maps. And that, I think, gives the highest level of safety when it comes to the limited access highway autopilot that most people want. And so I think that's a minimum of what you should expect for $2,500. I think you can buy it on Blue Cruise and Super Cruise for 3 years. And then, of course, Tesla's version, which is a camera only practically, they keep putting in and out radar. It is a similar functionality. The functionality of the Tesla vehicle is actually capable of doing more, but it's at a much higher risk. For example, the Tesla vehicle really wants you to have your hands on the steering wheel, not your hands off, whereas Blue Cruise and Super Cruise allow you to. Most people try to bypass that a lot, and that's where the issue comes in. And Tesla is able to do most roads as long as it's great weather conditions, perfectly painted lines, no sun in the front, and there's relatively minor traffic or alterations to the road, like cones and stuff like that. But they will mess up on curves. They will mess up on any obstacle that is there that is typically not found on roads, like metal pylons or something to keep traffic in the city. They're not very good at that at all.
So I should be able to expect in today's market that highway auto drive sounds like there's 3 different flavors, the Tesla, the Blue Cruise. And so I should be able to expect that. Where do you think that's within a reasonable time frame, like within the next couple of years? What kind of improvements do you think we would see?
You would expect to see more traffic jam assist, which is, again, something that Tesla does do pretty well. Other companies haven't really gotten to that point yet because of one function, which is automatic electronic braking, which is the idea that the camera can detect an obstacle in front of it at certain speeds and then stop. For you to be able to do traffic jam assist or in general automatic braking in any situation, you have to have a much lower false alarm rate with the sensors when it detects an object in front. Otherwise, it'll stop too often. I think you should expect that capability pretty much in the next 5 years. And then I think we can get into this, but I think advances in artificial intelligence will likely start getting you the first non-limited access highway. So limited access highway are your freeways. And then you have these like 2-lane roads that are highways, but they're still roads that can cross them. I think at that point in 5 years, you should be able to go on those as well pretty easily and robustly with most vehicles. There's always the Teslas who are going to skip corners and not really follow safety guidelines, or they are, but they're not going to enforce that in any meaningful way on their clients, on their customers, which will then get into accidents that way. And you see that in a weird way with Tesla. But most of the vehicle manufacturers will follow guidelines and will start giving you that as a normal part of the driving experience.
Well, what are some other technology innovations that you're betting on to drive your business growth?
In my mind, the technology for a completely different type of vehicle is already here. And that what I mean by that is you first had a regular car, then we went through this electric vehicle transformation. And I believe the next transformation is going to be the AI vehicle, the AI car. And I believe that's coming in. And there are several technologies, including mixed reality heads-up displays, plus some innovations on the sensor and perception side that I think is going to make your driving experience a lot more personalized, a lot funner, a lot safer. The human-machine interface between, obviously, the human, the driver, and the vehicle, I think is going to change dramatically.
Yeah, so not 4 pedals and steering wheel, but something else.
There'll still be the pedals and steering wheel, but I think the interface with the vehicle will be a much more natural interface. You'll be able to speak to it. It'll speak back to you. You'll be able to tell it to do things. It'll be able to display the information to you that it's in a way you've never been able to see before. Those kinds of things.
My next question was, what are the most significant gaps to those ambitions and the realities of today? You've already mentioned a couple. Sensor tech has to get better, but what are some other gaps?
I think sensors are there. I think their cost is challenging at low volumes because right now what you're looking at a BOM cost, rough estimate in the industry, somewhere between $300 and $600 for LiDARs. And then you add obviously the tier 1 and manufacturing costs on top of that. That's an issue because that's an expensive piece of equipment that the customer doesn't directly touch. Right. Mm-hmm. The infotainment's also about that much, by the way, but everybody's happy to pay for that for the infotainment because that's something you use in an intimate way. I would say the sensor technology price needs to come down, and things like mandating electronic braking, which will force LiDAR to be in most vehicles and force that price to go down quickly. And then I think the other technology that really needs is innovation. The technology is there, but I think it's not really a technological thing. It's a legacy with the OEMs. The best way to describe it is there's already a 3-year rule when you introduce new technology into a vehicle, right? You have to go through A sample, B sample, C sample, and hours of testing while you're doing that. Along with that is an inherently old platform. What does that mean? That means that the wiring, the data pathways, the operating system distribution of functionality in the vehicle it was done under a different time. It was done as a distributed single fault tolerance architecture. It was done with old cabling, slow speeds. And now you want to go into a world where things need to be at 50 hertz. Latency has to be super low. And so that infrastructure, which translates to old vehicle manufacturing lines and a lot of old technology that's already been certified, and there's a large, I would say, barrier to just going out in a new direction, right? So for example, if I say, forget the CAN bus, we need to have a completely new digital full Ethernet bus in the entire vehicle. You're talking about billions of dollars across the industry that you're going to have to ask the vehicle buyer to swallow. And that's hard for any company, any major OEM to just take on without knowing that they're immediately going to get a payback on that. And there's little pressure for them to do it. So what does this all mean? That means that the legacy infrastructure and the legacy of the OEMs themselves prevent innovation in vehicles right now. They're just not built to innovate. This is one reason why you see China actually do a lot of innovation with respect to the human machine interface, right? If you've ever driven a Chinese vehicle, a lot of the newer ones, not only are they much less expensive because they're not designed to last 12 years, and they have things like swappable batteries, but they're also, the inside of them really looks like a cell phone on wheels, right? I mean, some of this maybe is not 100% US and European safety compliant, but literally it's a bunch of apps that you can just push and do weird things on the vehicle. That type of innovation seems so far away from what the US and Europe are doing right now. It has US manufacturers worried. Like I just talked to one OEM who said that their last quarter, their sales fell by 35% in China. I asked, obviously the question was, why did they fall 35%? Because this is a high-end vehicle. This is a vehicle that is very well liked initially by the Chinese public. But the problem was this was the first time that this particular manufacturer did not offer a technology package that was comparable with technology packages from the native Chinese OEMs. And a lot of them made the decision that that's just now not good enough if it doesn't have it. Do you remember when Android Auto and Apple CarPlay came out?
Oh, yeah. If the car didn't have it, you didn't buy it.
Right. Do you remember when the iPhone and the Android phone came out? 2007. How long did it take Apple CarPlay and Android Auto to get into vehicles? 2018. So you're talking 10, 11 years before something that seems like a no-brainer right now took to get into the vehicle. That's too slow. So the OEMs are in a bind right now.
Yeah, I love this. We do a lot of application modernization. So we look for clients who did digital transformations like pre-2015. We're working on one right now that's like a business who still operates on a COBOL backend, old school backend. And we help them modernize into modern cloud services. We love doing it. We find partners who hoard this legacy tech like MSPs and whatnot. And I had never thought of the automotive infrastructure, like the car as we know it, as a legacy technology. But based on what you're saying, that is legacy infrastructure. That's a pre-2015 construct that a wiring harness has to originate at a battery and move down through the car, and batteries go in front. And this is just how it is. And we're getting some disruption of that from the electric car being kind of a new form factor, but it's still probably has to adhere to a lot of those similar regulations. That is super interesting. And I'm interested to take a look at one of these Chinese cars and see how that human interface has changed.
Oh yeah, significantly, right? But the safety laws are a little different. But this whole topic of, are the Europeans and US OEMs really in danger? And the answer is they are. There's a couple of telltale signs that tell you that they're in big trouble. Number one, they can't seem to attract the talent that it would take to make the necessary transformations. Let's say even an electric vehicle that's very simple to something that you would consider what would be the natural progression of everything right now, which is AI-ifying everything, which is the AI vehicle. They don't have the wherewithal to do that. So they can't attract the talent because most of those people are going to be working at startups that are going to offer them stock options, which would be worth 10 to 100 times more valuable than when they initially start. No OEM's going to do that. And they don't have the cash to just outright pay for those kind of employees. So you're in a situation where normally, if you are a blockbuster and you see Netflix coming from behind you, you can potentially buy out Netflix because market caps do it, not because you're silly and you're prideful and you don't think that's an actual thing. And then Netflix comes and basically takes away your lunch, but because they don't have the market cap to do so. I mean, think about the market caps of Tesla versus the three big guys in the US, Stellantis, Ford, and GM. Stellantis, Ford, and GM are worth about 150 billion total. Tesla's worth 1 trillion. Like you're talking about three companies who combined together can probably pull in about 400 billion in revenue, or Tesla's making maybe 100 billion in revenue. Each one of them probably makes 20 billion in revenue. It's nothing compared to what GM and Ford, who make about 6 million cars each, whereas Tesla makes maybe 1 million cars a year. You're talking about a ratio in revenue to market cap that's so upside down that it's already signaling to you that there's an issue, because you can't acquire new companies after the companies have become successful, because the chances are that company is just going to say, why would we let you acquire us? Your brand is going to reduce the ceiling of our brand's market cap. That would be dumb. And so by the time they identify somebody that they could acquire, that company is probably well on its way to being worth more than the actual company that they acquired themselves. Case in point, Cruise. Or had Cruise been actually allowed to leave prior to 2019, they would easily probably been worth more than, even if you say that's right or wrongly, at that time, they would have been worth more than GM itself. GM is artificially lowering the market cap of Cruise right now by being its wholly owned subsidiary. So you have this brand baggage that's associated with being owned and being associated with the legacy OEMs. That means that they can't acquire themselves out of this quagmire they find themselves in, where the technology and innovation is advancing at such a rapid pace that it's quickly than the ability for them to put new cars on the road, new models.
What's the business lesson or business abstraction from this? I feel like there's something to be said that large companies need to embrace like a startup culture. I call it raising dragons. Game of Thrones reference here. So the dinosaur needs to raise a dragon. So how do they do that? Like their culture is a company who is embridled with legacy tech is spending a lot to maintain that legacy tech. In your example, to issue the next year's model of car, they have a certain cost model. But then at some point they have to have the sparky, innovative team, like they have to embrace into some kind of process that will build the dragon, right? That's going to do the R&D, that's going to figure out the next form factor. That seems like, based on what we see, a almost near impossibility. Like it almost seems like they don't have that capability, but I honestly believe that they don't make the capacity for it. It's like, when you think this way, how do you empower a small innovative team to go do that next generation of thing without scrapping it on their first failure? I just wonder if there's a general business lesson in what we're seeing from them, because what it sounds like you're saying is that a company who is willing to take a risk on an AI from the ground up reimagined vehicle would basically be propulsed into like the Tesla tier simply by bringing a successful prototype to market that impressed everyone.
Well, there's a lot of things to unpack there. Number one, the investment environment is such right now in the United States that automotive is like persona non grata. Nobody wants to invest in things that.
It feels like that in general, to be honest, with a higher interest rate kind of adjustment we've made. We do seem to be living in an innovation starved capital environment. I would agree with that.
But it's not like that in China, for example. In China, you can get investments for new vehicle startups. Why? Why is that situation? I think the situation is because the thing that you can look at is, remember when the cell phones were feature phones, Nokia and Motorola owned the market back in 2006, 2007. It was the iPhone, the Evo 1 or Android, and then eventually they took over the market. Nokia and Motorola are the OEMs of today. They don't have the ability to deal with what it takes to create the next generation vehicle, which is software as a number one, not as a secondary thing. So, right, bending metal and making seats, etc., is the number one thing. This would be completely customer interaction, human machine interface, software focused. That's not their forte. They don't have the ability to do that. Neither did the Motorola and Nokia. They let Google and Apple really take over that market. And right now, Google and Apple are in a way doing the same thing. So the natural progression you would think would be that Google and Apple would eventually take over the automotive industry. One problem is they don't want the liability and the margins associated with automotive. Why would you want 10% margins overall and a bunch of liability and warranty that you have nothing like that in
Yeah.
selling iPads and iPhones? And you're talking about billions of units versus 100 million units a year.
Then does it transfer automotive to not where I don't own a vehicle, I just subscribe to a transportation service? The way to win in that environment seems to be to turn it into a utility and then own the utility.
So you're saying do like a utility where you buy transportation as a service, but there's no particular vehicle that you have?
Yeah, I don't own a vehicle. I just subscribe, and when I need a ride, I order it. It comes by, and it's an autonomous vehicle, and it takes me where I need to go.
Well, if it's an autonomous vehicle, then I would say you're probably 15 years away, right? You're not there yet, just because I understand that pretty well. But if it's somebody comes and delivers the vehicle for you and then leaves, then you're talking about capital expenditures, infrastructure that is prohibitive. So I don't know if you can do that quite yet.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if someone were to come up with the AI driven car, like you're suggesting, like the full AI, that they would not be able to sell it in the way cars are sold today.
Well, what I mean by AI, I don't necessarily mean that the car will drive by itself, at least not initially. What I think it will do is it will enhance the driving capability of the driver. And then over time, it can learn to drive on its own. But that's still years away. Probably faster than just creating a vehicle from scratch.
Yeah, but I imagine if it were true that you could build a fully autonomous vehicle, that the delivery and sales of that would not be a one-time purchase. It'd be a subscription to the manufacturer of that particular device.
Well, you're asking me to go into the mind of every man, woman, and child that's about to go turn 15 in the United States, including inner America and city America, and decide whether or not they want to give up, quote unquote, the great American freedom of having their car and that personal property that travels with you, where you can get some kind of independence. I don't know if America's ready, and indications are that people still want to own their vehicle.
Interesting. Cool. I want to turn the topic of conversation. You have a fantastic business mind. So I'm going to shift you a little bit off of your area of expertise specifically and ask you a general business question. Like, what advice can you share when you've run businesses in the past? What can you share around your technology roadmap and your overall business strategy? How do you plan that? How do you make decisions? Is there any tips and tricks that you have setting the vision and the execution plan for the businesses that you've been a part of?
It's really important that you stay technologically relevant as a technology company. I think Apple has to stay relevant, Google has to stay relevant. And in that case, you need to predict where the technology is going to be 3 years from now, right? Not tomorrow, but 3 years from now. And so you have to start making bets on technologies that are not even out right now and basically fold them into your roadmap. As a technical founder and a technical leader in a technical company, it really is, take anything, a cell phone, in my case, a LiDAR or a sensor. Each of these is composed into several components, maybe 2 to 5 components, major components. And each of those components is comprised of a basic technology, a chip, a type of bus, a type of memory, a type of display, for example, some type of a software architecture, maybe a firmware concept that you're talking about. And in the case of sensors, definitely some type of a detection concept, whether it's infrared, normal CMOS type silicon technology, or maybe thermal, right? Some kind of detection technology. And so you need to be aware of those components, the technology underlying those components, then the supply chain that supplies them, and be familiar with the supply chain changes that are going to happen over 3 years. So what's the tip and trick? Number one, hire the people to know the technology really well. You're not going to rely on memes and kind of hearsay by going on LinkedIn or whatever. Like that should be obvious. So that means hire PhDs, people that are social PhDs, meaning not people that just put their head down and look at and just kind of concentrate, but people that are out there talking to people. Hey, what have you seen? What's going on? Because one thing we know now is that academic research is not always the bleeding edge of technology. A lot of it is in corporate, hidden from the public research that is not in peer-reviewed journals. And if you do not know what's going on, you can get blindsided and not realize that something else is coming out.
Yeah, understood.
Plenty of examples of that. Bloom Energy is one of them, but I can think of 10 other ones. as we go along. And so having social R&D groups that, that means Lockheed needs to talk to Northrop Grumman, needs to talk to Boeing. They can't just live in a vacuum. Sure, try to have your own thing, but don't be silly. Talk to academia. Of course, you're going to do that. They're going to talk to you. That's easy to do. But have social sort of R&D people. Bet on multiple paths. Don't bet on one path. You bet on plan A, plan B, plan C, and assume A and B aren't going to work and be happy with plan C. I think those two things are probably two of the biggest ones to think about as you're planning your technology roadmap. And then the last one, of course, is make sure that the market is there for whatever technology you're going to do, especially if you're the first to market. Make sure the technology is going to be there, because if it's an improvement on an existing technology, then it's a lot easier to know that the market will be there. You just have to watch out for the disruptors.
Yeah. What's a lesson that you've learned from tech initiative that failed to deliver expected value? Like, what's a lesson you learned from failure?
The biggest lesson I think that I learned also has to do with the OEMs, right? And this is one of the things that I've learned in the automotive industry, right? And the same reason why investment community in the United States and Europe is not happy with the OEM, okay? And that is that the OEMs for the longest time have had a very captive audience. And even though they compete heavily against each other, there's still this unspoken sort of collaboration with each of them, which is to say that, each of them has their niche. They don't feel the need to necessarily go out and take the other person's market. And so while they will compete on maybe better this or that, and you notice they're all fast followers. They wait till one person does it and then they're all happy to copy it. What that does is it really reduces innovation. So what happens is that because they're so big and anything that you do is multiplied by a minimum of 100,000 to a million to 10 million units, it's a big number in every time they make a decision. That has a tendency to put a low pass filter on innovation. The lesson I learned, especially through LiDAR, was that selling LiDAR through an OEM that really has never thought about and doesn't really know how to sell something that innovative to the public, meaning you don't sell LiDAR, you sell the functionality of LiDAR and you make it obvious to the customer. You don't treat it just a part of nuts and bolts and then you put it in, you don't even tell the customer it can do it. You sell them on the advanced driving feature and you sell them on why it's important to have a LiDAR or camera or radar or whatever you're putting on there. OEMs are not very good at doing that particular one. They're geared towards a one-time sale to the consumer, and then they're going to sell them on the next great thing later on, 3 years down the line. My sort of lesson learned was don't rely on the OEMs to be as innovative because they, for the most part, have a captive audience. It isn't until China, and you can see how we're dealing with China. We're essentially putting tariffs on the imports to prevent that from happening. But outside of China and outside of government sort of propping up the OEMs, they would go out of business quickly until a new business model was developed for OEMs in order for them to compete globally.
What would you say to people who are just starting their career journey, maybe a business owner who's just getting started with a technology startup? What advice would you give to peers that are just beginning their journey?
I often give this piece of advice, which is that make sure you understand, you know what you don't know, and then minimize the things that you don't know. And the way you start doing is when you surround yourself with people that have orthogonal backgrounds. So when I started the company, I had Jordan Green, Ransom Wooler, Dr. Barry Bankin, and I made it such that they complimented me on skill sets that I didn't really go out and study in school. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a business major. I concentrated on math, physics, logistics, statistics, modeling, software, hardware. I'm like you, probably. I like to learn on my own. So I picked a lot of the things up that you would normally have to. I think if you're an intelligent person who understands and appreciates knowledge, you can sort of organize new things like business into your mind. But my advice is to find people that have orthogonal capabilities and then make them your partners. I think that's really important.
Yeah, love it. That's so great. Well, if people like what you had to share today, how should they connect with you?
I was just LinkedIn, probably the number one place that I think I love to communicate with audience or people. Louis Dussan on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message and I'd be happy to connect with you.
Great. We'll be sure to get that into the show notes. And man, it's been a great conversation. It's been awesome to talk about your background and your experience with the automotive industry and where it's going. So I really appreciate spending time with us today. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ben. Happy to do it again.
Awesome.